We now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in our webinar series. Today we'll be going over what's in my fish's food and look at how to read fish food nutrition labels. A lot of what we're looking at today can actually be applied to all nutrition labels. So if you haven't used the GoToWebinar format before, there is a little spot in the toolbar to your right where you can ask questions. So please feel free to fill in any questions that you have during the webinar, and I will try to get to them at the very end. So starting out, I am your host, Dr. Jessie Sanders. I am a certified aquatic veterinarian and chief veterinarian of Aquatic Veterinary Services. We are a mobile aquatic veterinary practice located in Santa Cruz, California. We cover over 300 miles of the California coast, extending from Sonoma County all the way down to Fresno. We are also the only West Coast all-aquatic fish hospital. So we have a facility here in Santa Cruz that can actually keep fish on a long-term basis with any sort of disease or illness. For more information about me or our practice, please see our website, cafishvet.com. So today, what we'll be looking at primarily are these guys. So this is the label off of a bag of koi food. A lot of information here, and some of it may be helpful, some of it may not. So today we'll be going through all the different parts and try to demystify what exactly all these different parts mean. So starting off with protein. Protein is the building blocks of any body, be you fish, human, dog, cat, shrimp. Protein is essential to growing up and growing strong. Fat, even though a lot of us don't like to hear the word, is very important, especially in hormone production, insulation, and energy. Ash is a component of nutrition that is often mislabeled. Ash actually refers to the mineral content of food. So if you can imagine you have a food item, no matter what it is, if you burn off all the energy, all the fat, all the protein, all the carbohydrates, basically all that you're left with is a solid mineral component, and that is called ash. Fiber, known as indigestible carbohydrates. There are two different kinds, soluble and non-soluble. Really, for fish, this isn't too big of an issue, so we won't be talking too much about it, but it is listed on those labels. And moisture. So this is very important for basically any dried food versus a wet food. So a lot of dog and cat foods, you can either have a wet or dry. Mostly all fish food, except for frozen, is going to be a dried pellet or flake. So the moisture is really going to vary based on how the food itself is processed. So starting off, you may have seen on that bag that crude label. Now, first of all, put these lovely barrels of crude oil out of your mind. Crude actually refers to the method of testing, not the product or ingredient itself. So basically, this is just a test parameter rather than any of this stuff. So let's just get this out of your mind right now, and we're going to ignore the word from now on. So starting out with our most important component of fish food, which is protein. So given the wide variation of species and energy requirements, the general guidelines for all fish food is going to be between 25 to 55% of the total diet. Now, this will vary between herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. Herbivores and omnivores are a little bit grouped together, generally lie between 35 and 45% protein. Please keep in mind, these are very general guidelines. Specific species of fish, there are some that are certainly more tested than others as far as their protein requirements. Those fish that are being grown for aquaculture, we know a lot more about them rather than some of the cute little tropical fish. So please keep in mind these are just general guidelines. Carnivores, obviously eating more meat, will need more protein, up to 40 to 55% of their total diet. Most importantly in protein is the quality of the protein. So what does this mean? Quality protein will be bioavailable and contain all the essential amino acids for life. Bioavailable basically just means that a fish can convert what it eats into what it needs. So they're able to break down different foods into those amino acids. And these essential amino acids are going to be about 50 to 60% of the total protein in the diet. So this is 50 to 60% of that 25 to 55% of the diet. For fish, the best source of quality protein will be animal protein, specifically fish meal. Basically, anything that another fish has, another fish can use. So the fish meal that you see in most diets is leftovers from carving up fish for human consumption. Bones, skins, scales, a little bit of fish bits is going to be what is technically called fish meal. Now this is all human grade protein. So this is actually a pretty good protein source for these guys. However, there are other sources available. The plant source for fish is going to be soybeans. You can have up to 50% of your total protein be soy and not lose any of those quality protein essentials. However, anything higher than this, the fish is really going to miss out on some of those essential amino acids, which again can be supplemented and may drive down the costs. On to fat. So fat is important in energy, insulation, and hormone production. A lot of hormones in fish are actually converted from the fat in their diet. Obesity in fish is a concern. Just like any cat or dog or other pet, fish can get fat from being overfed or being fed a diet that unfortunately they just can't convert into energy very readily. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. You want your fat to be 15 to 25% of the diet. And again, this is going to vary widely. And fish have a high requirement of N3 fatty acids. So this is in all those fish oils that everybody takes. The best source of those N3 fatty acids is obviously fish oil from other fish. Vegetable oils, unfortunately, have very few N3 fatty acids, and N6 fatty acids have actually been shown to increase inflammation in fish. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at all those lovely fish oils that you may or may not take yourself. Carbohydrates. So in most species of animals, this is going to be your primary energy source. It's very easily converted from food to energy. However, in fish, carbohydrates cannot really be easily digested. High levels of carbohydrates can actually affect liver function. The usual conversion and manipulation of carbohydrates by insulin is very different in fish. So you kind of got to play this a little bit lower than you would in other species. Omnivores, you're going to have about 25 to 40% of your diet. Carnivores, definitely less than 20. They're going to be needing more protein than carbs. A lot of commercial fish foods really don't have a lot of carbohydrates to begin with, which, again, is just fine for fish. Vitamins. So just like we get a lot of our vitamins from fruits and vegetables, unfortunately, fish need to supplement most of their water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins when kept in captivity. This includes vitamin A, C, D, E, and K. Vitamin A deficiencies, you can actually see skeletal deformities. And with enhanced levels of vitamin C and E, you can actually have an enhanced immune response. This is considered a prebiotic, which we'll again be talking about a little bit later. Vitamin C can actually be added in very high amounts with no ill effect on the fish. Vitamins are going to be the most sensitive to temperature changes, light, and moisture. Of this, vitamin C is very unstable. Most fish foods will actually have a stabilized version of vitamin C in their food. However, even with proper care and keeping, you can start to see a loss of vitamin content within 90 days. So this is only about 3 months. Very, very short amount of time. Now, most recommendations for keeping your food involve keeping it in an airtight, locked container where it does not have access to light, so preferably a dark container, and keep it in an area indoors where the temperature is not going to change very much. So very important to properly store your food to get the most out of it. Certainly you can continue to feed fish food past that 90 days, but you're really risking having very low vitamin content, not really having it at the level that would make your fish their healthiest. So now looking at our minerals, our ash. So in fish, there's little need for mineral supplementation. Most fish will get enough from their surrounding water. This is going to be a measure of your GH and KH of your water quality parameters. However, the one thing you need to supplement in fish that's important is phosphorus. This is usually listed extra on the label. Phosphorus is just not that readily available in most water sources, so it really needs to be supplemented in the food. Please keep in mind this is going to be different than the phosphate that it comes with most water quality test kits. So here's a little bit of a summary of what we've been talking about. So we have it divided into carnivores and omnivores and herbivores with the protein, fat, carbohydrates, and fiber. So again, fiber in fish, not really that important, so keeping it very low isn't going to hurt the fish. Like I said, this is for a lot of aquaculture species that we know a lot about. For most species of tropical aquarium fish, we really just don't know enough about their diet. So what we're going to say is variety is key. So with these guys, you really want to make sure that you feed them a variety of different foods. Our tropical fish here get a mix of flakes, pellets, and frozen foods. So we try to vary it up between a little bit more omnivore and herbivore, maybe a few little carnivorous diets with those bloodworms. But really, variety is key when you have tropical aquarium fish. We just don't know enough about the individual species. So now we're going to play a little bit of a game. I have 5 brands of koi foods listed here. It's actually a mix of all-season and growth foods. We have our little chart there at the bottom. Almost all of these are going to fall within the recommended levels. Koi are omnivores, so even a little bit lower protein, meaning these fish don't run marathons, they just kind of sit in their ponds every day, so having a little bit of a lower protein really isn't going to affect them too much. But you can see here even the wide variety between all these different foods. Some of them do not list moisture. Some of them do not list the ash content. Some of them do not list the phosphorus. And unfortunately, they're not required to do anything but the protein, fat, and fiber. So a food bag that is putting all of these on their labels is probably going to be able to tell you a little bit more about what's in there. So taking a look at these, here's the results that we see. So the first 2 are both Hikari brands. One's the economy brand, which is priced a little bit lower, and then the staple. You can see that even between these 2 different types of food, both all-season, good quality foods, is going to be a little bit varied in their mineral content and their protein. This could just be a price point. This could just be their marketing strategy. Ultra Balance, this is actually their growth food, listed with some of the other all-season foods. Perfectly fine protein requirements, good amount of minerals in there, fat and fiber, all good. Nijikawa, a newer fish food to the market. Only thing that's different about them, they have a lot higher fat content and a lot lower fiber. Again, we don't know if this is good or bad in koi, but it's just something to be aware of as the difference between the foods. And Tetra Vibrance, all the way on the right there, is one of the most available over in most pet stores. And again, protein's a little bit lower, but another good quality food. So if this hasn't confused you, then I would be surprised, because a lot of these numbers really don't tell us a lot. So now we're going to be looking at the ingredients. So now that you know all the different requirements of the different components, we're going to be taking a look at what comprises them. So first, starting out, we're going to list all of our proteins. So this includes wheat flour, fish meal, soybean meal, rice bran, corn gluten, brewer's dried yeast, seaweed meal, krill meal, and thiamine. So this is a long list of different protein products, which are all going to make up this total of 35% protein. Now, some of this, the seaweed meal and the krill meal, are actually going to add to some color enhancers, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. Some of these components also contain carbohydrates and fiber. The only straight carbohydrate that we have on here is garlic, which is actually a prebiotic. They have all of their vitamins supplemented. They have the E, C, riboflavin, A, niacin, D3, biotin, and choline. And then minerals, the calcium, phosphate, salt, magnesium, zinc, manganese, and copper. The only thing we'll leave out of there is the blue 2, which is an artificial color. Makes the pellet a little bit green colored. So, what do we see on this label here? Well, we definitely have the fish meal, which is a good component. However, the wheat flour is going to be the biggest protein source there. Soybeans, again, can make up about 50% of the total protein, which is good. And it has a good mix of other proteins that are cheaper. So the rice, the corn, certainly good protein sources and a little bit cheaper. So that's what makes this a more bargain brand. All right, moving on to our next friend here. So you'll see a lot of the same things. We got the wheat starch, fish meal, corn flour, soybean meal, oats, wheat gluten, wheat germ meal, potato protein, and then a whole lot of long, kind of funky sounding names. Most of these are going to be your vitamin and mineral supplements. However, the only thing about this, with the thiamine, the cyanocobalamin, cholecalciferol, some of these are actually going to be your amino acid supplements, which suggests that your protein is not going to be a complete protein with all those amino acids. So yes, it does mean that you're going to have to figure out what some of these fancier, longer words actually mean. Again, if there's zinc, calcium, ferrous sulfate, cobalt, those are all very recognizable minerals. This one in particular has 2 different sources of vitamin C. So it has the ascorbic acid, which again, most of you know is vitamin C, and then a really long one that says stabilized vitamin C. So like I said, it's very important that koi food have this stabilized version, which again, isn't going to last very long, but that ascorbic acid really probably isn't going to last more than a month or so, just because you need that stabilized form in order to keep things going for your fish. So last one here, I'll make it a little bit easier and color code everything for you. So the red is in protein, the blue is going to be your vitamins, your yellow is going to be your minerals. Now this company uses 2 different premixes of vitamins and minerals, making this a little bit easier. They are actually adding on some amino acids at the very end. The lysine, threonine, methionine, those are all amino acids that need to be supplemented to their wide variety of different protein sources. So again, called into question, this might not be the best food, or at least not have the best protein. 2 things that stick out in my mind for these is they list meat meal, just regular old meat. I have no idea what that means. So seeing this on a food label makes me question why they put it in there. And then down at the bottom, the other purple one, nucleotides. This just means protein. I don't know what exactly they're hoping to put with nucleotides. But 2 things you should really question on a fish food label. The astaxanthin is technically a carbohydrate. This is one of the pigment additives that they add to a lot of koi food. So always look at these labels and make sure you're able to tell what is going on and question some of these choices that they're putting on their labels. So when considering 2 different foods, again, it's going to be a little an apple versus an orange. You always want to consider different protein sources. A lot of these will have multiple ones listed together. Protein's always going to be the biggest component. You want to look for those additional amino acid supplements. This could indicate that they have a poor protein source. Again, the supplements don't really, they mean that your fish is going to get all the nutrition, but you might consider looking at something that's already complete. You want to make sure that your vitamins are supplemented. You really need to see the A, C, D, E, and K, all your water-soluble and some of your fat-soluble vitamins listed. A lot of different foods will list other ones. There was a lot of vitamin B in the last couple ones. If you are ever unsure about a label, we highly recommend that you ask the manufacturer for diet information. And if they are reluctant, share you an article that possibly was written by a high school student, it's not really in your best interest to continue using that food. So we prioritize our foods, what we sell and recommend, based on what the manufacturers had shared with us, what information they give us as far as nutrition and nutritionists, and how open they are with all of their different additives and how well trained their staff is. So keep this in mind. If you ever have a food that you are considering, looks good, have a few questions about it, definitely look into the manufacturer and be an advocate for your fish. So now talking about some of those color enhancers. This is specific to koi and some goldfish diets. Goldfish are getting a little bit fancier these days. So there are 3 different kinds. The one that you're going to see in fish food are called carotenoids. These can be synthetic materials, color enhancers, yeast, bacteria, and fungi. A lot of what you still see in fish foods is krill or shrimp meal, can also be listed as taxanthin, and algae. Keep in mind that some of these red enhancing pigments may turn some white fish yellow. This is very varied. This, we believe, is genetic based on if they do have any underlying red pigment in those white cells. The fish on the right here has definitely received a red enhancing diet. This is the winner of the ZNA NorCal Koi Show of 2016. A lot of these color enhancing diets will be fed for just a few weeks before the shows to really bring out that red pigment. Feeding these color enhancing pigments year round certainly cannot bring all of those colors to the surface any better than they already do. So it's recommended with these color enhancing foods that they are fed for a short period of time. They also tend to be very heavy in the protein. Again, that's specific to koi and some goldfish. So as with any foods, packaging materials, you really want to keep an eye out for marketing. So the biggest thing right now is gluten-free, and I can guarantee you that no fish has ever been gluten intolerant. This is a novel ingredient, so fish really don't see gluten out in the wild. So having a fish food that has wheat flour in it, not a problem. They will be able to handle it just fine, I promise. Corn-free. So we're starting to see foods that have corn-free listed in them. Corn is a cheap protein source. Again, we see it in a lot of the more readily available foods. This one has it in a couple different forms. However, with this one, you can see that they've had to supplement a lot of the amino acids. So corn really isn't going to be a big problem with your diet. Fish can process it, no problem, but you will need to be adding other things to the fish food to make sure that it is a complete food with a complete protein with all of the amino acids. And feeding fish meal. So some people really want to get away from feeding fish meal to fish. Yes, there is some ethical quandaries into this. However, fish meal really is the best source of protein and has all of the essential fatty acids that fish need. So it is completely up to you if you do not want to feed your fish fish meal, but it is a very good source of everything that they need to be a happy, healthy fish. Prebiotics and probiotics. So this you probably see a lot, just even advertised on TV. What's the difference between here? So probiotics are bacteria that are added to food to aid in digestion. These are bacteria that must tolerate bile and the stomach acidity of carnivores. A lot of this is lactic acid bacteria. Basically, these are bacteria that will make it through the gut and then stay there, hang around, and help break down food past what a fish's normal diet could do. So it tries to make them better converters of energy. Prebiotics are additives that are aimed at revving up a fish's natural immunity. And this includes garlic beta-glucans, which is another type of bacteria, and vitamin C. You can see in the bag on the right, there's a lot of the prebiotics and probiotics that are listed here. Again, this is something to take into consideration when you're reading a fish food label. A lot of studies have actually been done to show that both of these are very good for fish that are kept in captivity. So if you see these listed on a label, that is what those two mean. Formulations. So again, with fish food, there's lots of different formulas that you can go with. And really you want to choose a food based on the mouth size of your fish. For most fish, you want to get them the biggest pellet that they can eat without having to dislocate their jaw. because the pellets are actually going to retain more of their vitamins, minerals, protein, because they have less surface to mass ratio. So basically, if you take a pellet and you put it in water, the only thing that's going to dissolve is around the area of the pellet, the very external surface. If you take that pellet and crush it flat, you've significantly increased the surface to mass ratio, and therefore, as soon as you drop it into the water, you're going to lose a lot of that nutrition because it's just going to leach right out. This is especially important for those water-soluble vitamins because you really want those vitamins to get into your fish, and the water is not really going to care too much. Live foods we recommend leaving for very small fish, very picky eaters, and sick fish. Basically, a food of last resort. If you have a fish who is miserable and doesn't want his flakes, doesn't want his pellets, but you put something in there that's wiggling around, or say has previous wiggled, because a lot of those bloodworms and blackworms, you want to make sure that they have that as a special treat and don't get used to it, so the fact that when they do get sick, they're not going to want to eat anything. So, highly recommend that the live foods be left as last resort or for very, very tiny fish. Medicated feeds. So, unfortunately, there is no one overseeing what medications are going into these foods or what formulations. And due to new FDA regulations, a lot of these products are no longer available. However, this does not mean that you cannot get actual medicated feeds. The one thing that you would need is a prescription from a fish veterinarian. These policies were set in place to enforce to keep antibiotics from being overused. There is a big problem in fish hobbyists. Basically, if there's any sort of problem, let's throw antibiotics at it. And these antibiotics could be exposed to humans, they get into our water systems, and then affect those fish. So really, we want to keep them from being overused and only use antibiotics when they're warranted under the direction of a veterinarian. So it's always recommended that you at least know somebody in your area who can help you with your fish if necessary. So if you live within the United States, you have the American Association of Fish Veterinarians listed at fishvets.org. And then if you're international, those outside of the United States, you have the database of the World Aquatic Veterinary Medical Association, and that's listed at aquavetmed.info. So 2 great resources for anybody who owns fish. It's always good just to have somebody in your area that you can call with questions. So let's go over some take-home points. For fish, there are no set guidelines for fish food like other pets, dog, cats, etc. Most of the dog and cat foods are under the control of the Association of American Feed Control Officers, also known as AFCO. They set requirements for different life stages of animals. And if you've ever looked at the back of a bag of cat or dog food, you will see that it is either AFCO formulated to meet the requirements of blank age group, or that they've actually undergone feeding trials to prove that the ingredients in their food do what they say they're supposed to do. So, unfortunately, that does not exist for fish, except for some very, very non-specific guidelines. So, other than protein, fat, and fiber, there's really no requirements for these guys. So, as owners, you have to take it upon yourself to do your own research. If you have any questions about the ingredients, why a certain protein is used compared to another one, we recommend that you contact companies directly. And if their answers don't live up to your standards, we highly recommend that you contact another company. We understand that there is lots of options out there with lots of varying price points. So, yes, there are some cheaper foods that are great quality fish foods. You just have to go through that label and evaluate all of those protein sources, all the vitamins and minerals, and make sure that your fish is getting what they need. Really good nutrition is essential to healthy fish. It is the best thing that you can do, other than good water quality, to making sure that your fish will be happy and healthy. So this webinar has been recorded. If you know of anybody else who would like to see this, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, hopefully you got some good information out of this as far as how to decode fish nutrition labels. If you're ever in the area and want to stop by, we're happy to talk to you more about what goes into different fish foods and their labels, and we can help you evaluate which one is best for your pond or tank. A lot of people who have multiple species of fish, different outcomes with say their koi going to shows versus those staying home. They're all going to have very different requirements for their diet. So this was just meant to be a general overview. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to email me. My email is cafishvet@gmail.com. You can actually contact me by replying to any of the emails that were sent out to you about the webinar. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope that everybody has a good evening. Thank you very much.